You thought I wasn't going to find you.
The first thing I felt was his hand. Not music, not the warm press of bodies on a crowded floor, not the sharp sweetness of champagne I hadn't finished. His hand wrapped around my wrist like something that had been waiting all night to close. I heard Kolade's voice before I turned around. You thought I wasn't going to find you. It wasn't a question. It was the kind of statement a man makes when he's already decided the answer doesn't matter. I turned slowly because I knew better than to jerk away. 3 months had taught me that much. 3 months of new SIM cards and different routes to the office and sleeping with a kitchen knife I kept telling myself was for the mangoes I never ate. 3 months of learning how small a person can make herself, and still here he was, in our Daisy's house, under her chandelier, smiling at me like we were two old friends who'd bumped into each other at the market. Kolade, my voice came out steadier than I felt. Let go of my wrist. Keep walking. He leaned close enough that I could smell the whiskey on his breath, and stop making a scene. The irony of that, stop making a scene, as if his hand on my wrist wasn't already a scene, as if 50 people in a room hadn't already registered the tension and collectively decided to look somewhere else. I pulled back, his grip tightened. I pulled harder. He simply shifted his weight, casual, unhurried, and walked me forward like I was luggage he was wheeling toward a gate. You're hurting me. Walk. The music was still playing, Afro beats, something warm and percussive that didn't know what was happening 3 feet from the speakers. A woman in a gold sequin dress glanced over, met my eyes, and looked away. A man in a cream agbada laughed at something his companion said and slapped his knee. 2 conversations swallowed us whole without stopping. This is how it happens. This is how it always happens. The room is full and the room is empty at exactly the same time, and you stand inside that terrible emptiness knowing there is no version of help me that anyone wants to hear tonight. Kolade pulled me toward the glass doors that led to the balcony. I dug my heels into the floor. He wrapped his free hand into my braids. The pain hit before the sound did. My own voice cracked open and raw. Stop! And then his fist tightened at the roots and I was bending, my spine curving against my will, my hands clawing at his wrist while the floor of Daisy's beautiful parlor tilted sideways beneath my feet. You embarrassed me, he hissed into my ear, his mouth so close his lips grazed my braids. 3 months you've been running like I'm nothing. Stop! Keep saying it and I pull harder. The tears that burned my eyes weren't grief, they were fury, the hot, choking fury of a woman who knows exactly what's happening to her and cannot make it stop. I heard myself begging. I hated myself for it. He laughed, and that laugh, low, indulgent, almost fond, was the worst sound I had ever heard come from a person who once told me he loved me. That was when I saw him. He was at the bar, leaning against it with the casual posture of a man who had been standing in expensive rooms for so long that expensive rooms no longer required his attention. Korean, maybe 32, 33, cream linen shirt, sleeves folded back to the forearm, one hand resting on the counter beside a glass of dark whiskey he hadn't touched. He wasn't filming me on his phone. He wasn't pulling someone's arm to whisper the drama into their ear. He was watching. Not with the wide, uncertain eyes of someone who didn't know what to do, with the still, deliberate eyes of someone who was deciding. Kolade jerked my braids and my head snapped down. I caught one last glimpse, the man at the bar setting his glass down slowly with the particular care of someone who was finished deciding, and then my chin was nearly to my chest and all I could see was the marble floor. I heard his footsteps. No rush, no scramble, just footsteps that came across the room at the pace of someone who had already calculated everything and found the outcome satisfactory. The music played, 50 people looked away. And then the footsteps stopped. Let her go. 2 words, no heat, no performance, just sound that landed like a door closing, final, firm, filling the room without raising itself above it. Kolade froze. I felt it in his hand, the way certainty suddenly developed cracks. He straightened slowly, pulling me upright with him, trying to reclaim height, reclaim authority. He turned to look at the man beside him. Mind your business. This is between me and my girl. She isn't your girl. A slight tilt of the head, patient, almost gentle, the way you might correct a child who said something embarrassing. You don't know what you're walking into, Kolade said. He was doing the thing, the puffed chest, the lowered voice, the performance of a man who is only dangerous when no one can verify the claim. I saw Kolade's eyes drop to one hand. I saw the shift. The confidence drained out of him so completely, so quickly, that for one strange moment I almost understood it. Fear does that, strips the theater right off a person and leaves the real thing underneath. Ryu Seong-jae, Kolade said. His voice had changed, smaller. Wait, Ryu Seong-jae? From the Incheon family? The man said nothing. He didn't need to confirm what the room already knew. I didn't know. Kolade's hand went slack in my braids. I swear I didn't know she was... You put your hands on someone under my protection. It wasn't said loudly. It was said with the quiet, impersonal authority of a man reading a verdict. I stumbled forward, catching myself at the edge of a side table, my legs unsteady, my scalp burning, my throat full of something that wasn't words yet. I turned to look at the man who had just claimed to have been protecting me. I had never seen him in my whole life. Kolade was still talking, apologizing now, tripping over himself, the performance of a dangerous man having revealed itself to be what it always was, a bluff held together by the assumption that no bigger bluff would show up. I didn't know. I leave. I'm gone. You keep her. He walked backwards 3 steps, then turned, then half ran toward the exit. The room exhaled. Conversations resumed. Someone's laughter floated up from across the room, too loud, too late. Ryu Seong-jae looked at me. Go home, Adanna. I stared at him. He knew my name. Ifeoma didn't stop shaking until we were 3 blocks from the house. She'd found me at the elevator, gripped my arm, pressed the lobby button 6 times. Now she sat behind the wheel of her Camry with both hands clenching the steering wheel and her eyes doing the thing they did when she was trying to hold herself together for someone else's sake. Adanna, who was that man? I don't know. He knew your name. I know. He knew your... She stopped, exhaled. My brother's friend does private security. He's worked events for some of those people, the connected kind. I've heard that name before, Adanna. Ryu Seong-jae. My head was still throbbing where Kolade had gripped. I pressed 2 fingers to my temple. What about him? He's not just connected. He's the kind of man who makes other dangerous men careful. She dropped me at my gate 20 minutes later. I locked my front door, checked the windows, pushed the couch against the door for the first time in 3 months. Then I sat on my bed with my phone face up in my lap, staring at it. Nothing. No call from Kolade, no text, no voice note beginning with "Baby, let me explain." The silence should have been a gift. Instead, it sat in the room with me like a third person, waiting. I didn't sleep. By 4 a.m., I had packed, not dramatically, no suitcase, no theater, just a good leather bag with clothes, documents, the emergency cash I kept folded into the spine of a novel Kolade never read. I'd done this before. I knew what to take and what to leave. The trick was not to feel too much about what you left. The sun came up and still nothing from Kolade. At 9:17, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it ring twice, 3 times. My thumb hovered. I answered, Adanna. No greeting, just my name, spoken the way someone says a word they've been practicing. How did you get this number? I've had it for some time. My stomach tightened. What does that mean? It means you've been safe longer than you realized. A pause, and then his voice dropped a register, like what came next required a different room. Kolade has debts, old ones, serious ones. He borrowed from people I have business arrangements with, the kind of people who don't offer extensions. I know he had money problems. When he couldn't repay, he offered collateral. The word landed strangely. What kind of collateral? You. The room didn't spin. It just became very, very still. He gave them your home address, your work location, your schedule, photographs. He told them you were his to deliver whenever they required it. The contract was signed 11 days ago. My legs stopped working. I sat down on the edge of the window ledge, the phone pressed hard against my ear, some part of me convinced that if I held it tight enough, the words would stop being true. That's not... My voice came out broken at the seam. He wouldn't. It's already done. No cruelty in it, just the particular gentleness of someone telling you a thing you have to know. Last night wasn't Kolade trying to win you back. It was Kolade demonstrating to them that he still had control over you. Proof of delivery in their language. 11 days. 11 days ago, I was drinking tea in my office and sending Ifeoma voice notes about what to cook on Sunday. 11 days ago, somewhere, someone was signing a document with my name on it. Why are you telling me this? I whispered. Because I bought the contract. Silence. I paid the full amount owed plus the interest. You're no longer their collateral. The debt is settled. I'm not... I stopped, started again. I'm not something that can be bought. No, he said, and his voice was careful with it. You're not, but in their ledger you were, and if I hadn't intervened, they would have collected. They don't negotiate, Adanna. They don't give second chances, and they don't care about context. They simply take what they believe they're owed. I was crying. I hadn't noticed when it started. The tears were quiet, the kind that don't announce themselves. There's a car parked outside your gate. Driver's name is Emeka. He's been there since 6 this morning. You can get in and let me take you somewhere safe while I finish resolving this, or you can stay and handle it on your own. I won't make that choice for you. A breath. But understand, Kolade is not the only person looking for you right now. I walked to the window, looked down at the street. The black Lexus was there, dark tinted windows, engine off, completely still. I'd seen it before, 3 weeks outside the pharmacy, last Tuesday on the road to work. I'd told myself I was paranoid, that Kolade had made me see danger where there was only coincidence. I had been wrong about which danger I was seeing. I grabbed my bag from the bed. I didn't say goodbye to the apartment. There was nothing in it that mattered more than leaving it. Emeka didn't speak. He opened the door, closed it behind me, and drove. 35 minutes through traffic, up through the part of the city where the roads got quieter, and the gates got taller, and the generators hummed instead of growled. We descended into an underground car park beneath a building I'd only ever seen from the outside, the kind that appeared in magazine features about architectural design, with captions that mentioned awards. He led me to an elevator with no visible buttons, just a keypad and a biometric reader that registered his thumb like it had been expecting him. The doors opened directly into a space that did not feel like a home. Floor-to-ceiling windows, the entire city laid out below like a map drawn by someone who wanted to remind you of its scale. Marble the color of old bone, so clean it held my reflection back at me. Furniture in charcoal and ivory that had the particular stillness of things chosen by someone with strong opinions and no sentiment. No photographs, no shoes by the door, no forgotten cup on the counter. Mr. Ryu will arrive this evening. Second door on the left is your room. Everything you need has been arranged. He was gone before I could ask what everything meant. The bedroom was larger than my sitting room and both bedrooms at home combined. White linens, a bathroom with warm stone tiles in a rainfall shower, and the wardrobe. I opened it slowly. Cotton shirts in my size, dark jeans, a few dresses, simple ones, the kind I actually wore, not the kind people imagine women like me should want. A navy wool cardigan, sneakers, and one pair of low heels, every tag still attached. Nothing was designer, nothing was excessive. Everything was exactly what I would have bought for myself. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. On the nightstand, folded once, a piece of paper, handwritten in clean, deliberate strokes. You are safe here. No one else knows this address. Sleep if you can. No signature. He didn't need one. He came back at 7 that evening with 2 bags of food from a restaurant I'd heard of but never been to. He set the containers on the dining table without announcement. Eat first. He sat across from me. We ate. Jollof rice from one container, doenjang jjigae from another, served side by side like there was nothing unusual about the combination, like 2 cultures sharing a table with the most natural thing in the world. He ate with focused quiet, no small talk, no performance of hospitality, no watching my face to see if I appreciated it. When the containers were empty, he looked at me. You'll stay here until this is resolved. You don't contact anyone from your previous routine, not your friend Ifeoma, not your colleagues. If anyone asks, you're visiting extended family up country. For how long? As long as it takes. I folded my hands on the table. You can't simply keep me here. I'm not keeping you anywhere. His voice was level without irritation. You're free to leave right now. I won't stop you. But the people Kolade contracted with don't consider the debt resolved just because I've paid. They consider it a renegotiation, and they're still watching for an opportunity. What did you do to Kolade? He was quiet for a moment. He's alive. That's not what I asked. It's what I'm telling you. 3 days settled into something like routine. Seong-jae came and went without predictable schedule. Sometimes he was at the table with a laptop when I woke, not brooding, just working, the ordinary labor of whatever life this was. Other times, the apartment held his absence like a held breath. He never explained where he went. I didn't ask. On the 4th night, I couldn't sleep. I walked out into the main room at 2 a.m. and found him at the windows, still dressed, tie loosened, looking at the city below like it was a document he was reading. He knew I was there without turning. Can't sleep? No. We stood in silence. The city hummed its low frequency. Somewhere far below, a siren wailed and faded. He turned his head, and his eyes dropped, just briefly, just for a moment, to my collarbone, to the scar Kolade had left there 6 months ago when he shoved me into the corner of the kitchen counter during an argument I hadn't started. A thin, jagged line, silvery now, that ran along my shoulder like a sentence written in a language I never asked to learn. I'd forgotten I was wearing the sleep shirt, wide neck. The scar was visible. Seong-jae's jaw tightened. It was small, controlled, barely visible, but it was there. That won't happen again, he said. You can't know that. He looked at me then, full and direct. Yes, he said quietly, I can. He turned back to the window. I went back to my room. I lay awake for an hour, staring at the ceiling, listening to the city, turning that exchange over my mind like a smooth stone. There was something in the way he'd said it, not the declaration of a man making a promise he wasn't sure he could keep, but the statement of a man identifying a fact. That scared me more than anything Kolade had ever done. On the 5th night, I broke his one rule. He'd told me to stay. He'd said it clearly, without theater, and I agreed. But something in his face when he left, a tightness around the eyes, a pause at the door like he was reconsidering telling me something, pulled at me after the car disappeared. I found the second phone in his coat pocket, slim, black, the kind with no apps and no camera, a tracker device clipped to the inner lining. I recognized it from an obsessive documentary phase I'd had the previous winter. I shouldn't have. I knew I shouldn't have. I followed the signal. The warehouse sat at the edge of the industrial quarter, where the city ran out of ambition. Corrugated iron walls, no signage, a broken security light leaking orange. I parked a street away and walked, keeping to the shadows, moving slowly, grateful for the dark cardigan I'd grabbed on the way out. There was a broken window panel on the east side. I pressed myself to the wall and looked through. The floor was empty except for 4 people. Seong-jae stood in the center, hands in his pockets, completely still. Emeka was 3 feet behind him, arms at his sides, watching the 2 men across the open space. The men were heavy-set, wearing suits that fit like they'd been purchased in a hurry. One held a manila folder, the other held nothing. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the room. The man with the folder was talking, gesturing at a document, pointing at Seong-jae, the dismissive energy of someone who believes they hold more cards than they do. The other man nodded along, the satisfied smirk of an audience that has already decided the performance will go its way. Seong-jae listened. He didn't shift his weight, he didn't fold his arms, he didn't do anything with his face that gave away what he was hearing. He just waited with the patience of someone who has decided that patience itself is a form of pressure. Then the man with the folder said something that changed the air. I didn't hear it, but I saw it, the almost imperceptible shift in how Seong-jae was standing, his shoulders settling, his weight redistributing, and then slowly, deliberately, he reached up and unfastened the button of his jacket. Just one button. The room changed. The man with the folder stopped talking mid-sentence. The other man's smirk dissolved. They both stepped back, not dramatically, not all at once, but with the instinctive, involuntary movement of people whose bodies have registered a threat before their minds caught up. Seong-jae spoke. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw their effect. The folder placed on the crate between them, hands raised slightly, a slow, deliberate step back. Then he picked up the folder, passed it to Emeka, and walked toward the exit. No rush, no backward glance. I ran. I made it to the apartment before they did, barely. I was on the couch with a book open when the elevator opened and Seong-jae walked in. He looked at me. Then he looked at my shoes by the door. They were dusty, from the gravel outside the warehouse. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just stood there, his jacket back on, completely composed, watching me in the way that made me understand why rooms went quiet when he walked into them. "Where did you go, Adanna?" My mouth opened. "Don't," he said quieter than expected. "Don't give me a version. Just tell me." "The warehouse." Something moved across his face. Not anger, something slower and heavier than anger. "I needed to know. I couldn't just sit here while you—" "Yes," his voice was controlled. "You could. That was exactly what was required of you." "I'm not—" "Adanna." He stepped closer, and I realized again, as I had the first night, how tall he was. "Do you understand what those men would have done if they had seen you there? If they had looked out and recognized you? They would have taken you, flat, Certain. Not to negotiate, not to make a point to me, to take, to remind every person in this city what happens to people who are claimed and then exposed. You would have become the lesson. My throat tightened. I cannot protect you if you make yourself impossible to protect. The anger left me. Not because he'd argued it away, because somewhere underneath the fear and the grief and the 3 months of running, I understood he was right. I was in a world with rules I hadn't learned yet, and the cost of breaking them by mistake was not mine to pay alone. I'm sorry. He turned toward his room, stopped at the door. His hand rested on the frame. From now on, if I tell you to stay, you stay. He didn't look back. Not because I'm telling you what to do, because I need you here. He closed the door. I sat with that for a long time. 5 days of quiet. 5 days of early mornings and shared meals and conversations that stayed deliberately near the surface. Books, the city, small observations. 5 days of learning to exist in the same space as a man I still didn't fully understand, but whose presence had started to feel, against all logic, like the safest thing in a world that had stopped being safe for me. On the 6th night, Seong-jae came home early. I knew from the moment the elevator doors opened that something had happened. His face was a wall. His jaw held differently. Kolade contacted them. I was standing in the kitchen. I put down the glass I was holding. He reached out to the men I settled the debt with directly. He told them, I'm holding you here against your will, that you're a victim of a different kind of capture. Seong-jae set his phone on the counter. He offered to clear an outstanding obligation they hold over him if they move on you anyway and leave me out of it. The glass of water I'd been holding was now on the counter. I didn't remember putting it there. He knows where I am? He's guessing, but he's guessing correctly within a few neighborhoods, which means he has a source. What are you going to do? He was quiet. He stood at the counter with his hands braced against the surface, staring at nothing. And that stillness, that particular loaded stillness, told me more than his words had. Seong-jae, I gave him his life, he said. That night at Adaze's party, I could have ended it differently. I chose not to. I thought fear would be sufficient. It wasn't. No. He'll keep coming, I said quietly. That's who he is. He doesn't stop. He looked at me then. I know. The air between us had a texture now, thick with the thing neither of us was saying yet. Would it bother you, he said carefully, if I handled it permanently? I should have felt shock. 6 months ago, I would have felt it, that automatic, civilized recoil from a question like this. But 6 months ago, I hadn't lived inside Kolade's orbit long enough to understand what permanent meant and what its absence cost. I thought about the scar on my shoulder, the night he locked me out in the rain at 2 a.m. because I'd laughed at someone else's joke, the morning I called Ifeoma from a bathroom floor, the 11-day-old contract with my name and address and schedule written out for strangers who treated people as logistics. No, I said, it wouldn't. Something settled in his eyes, recognition, then trust me to handle it. He left at 10 p.m. He did not tell me where. I didn't follow this time. I sat on the couch and listened to the city and tried to read and failed and made tea I didn't drink and checked my phone for messages that didn't come. The night stretched wide and empty, full of its own particular kind of tension. Not fear exactly, but awareness. The sense of standing at the edge of something that, once finished, would be irreversible. He came back at 6:14 in the morning. His clothes were clean, his hands were clean. He looked like a man returning from an early meeting, not from the kind of night I'd spent imagining. He set his keys on the counter. It's done. I stood. Is he alive? He said it before I finished. He's in hospital. By the time he's discharged, he'll be under arrest. Fraud, assault, trafficking of a person. The paper trail goes back 18 months. I made sure it was documented, and I made sure it reached people who can't be persuaded to ignore it. He walked toward his room, stopped, turned back. You're free, Adanna. Wherever you want to go, whatever you want to return to, there's nothing left in the way. I looked at him. This man I'd known for 10 days, this man who had bought my name out of a ledger and given me clothes in my size and left notes on nightstands and stood in empty warehouses so I wouldn't have to. What if I don't want to go? I asked. He was very still. Then don't. 3 weeks later, he asked me to accompany him somewhere. A gathering, he said, folding a cufflink into place. Private, associates. Why? He looked up from the cufflink. Because it's time that people understood where you stand. And where is that? He held my eyes. With me. The venue was a hall in the kind of building that didn't advertise itself. No visible sign, good security, the kind of light that made everyone look intentional. Music this time was softer, a pianist in the corner, the kind of crowd that wore wealth like something they'd stopped thinking about. When we entered, the room noticed him first, then it noticed me, then slowly, collectively, it noticed us together. Seong-jae's hand rested on my lower back as he moved through the space, not possessive, not performative. The way you hold something you know the value of. He stopped in the center of the room. I stood beside him. The same floor, almost the same spot, where Kolade had bent me over by my braids in front of 50 people who chose not to see. This is Adanna Obichina, Seong-jae's voice carried easily without being loud. She's not a guest of mine. She's not under my protection. A pause. She's with me. The room understood. I could see it moving through the faces, a recalibration, a filing away of information, the quiet but absolute update of social ledgers. An older man across the room, white at his temples, a glass held loosely at his side, the kind of face that had been unimpressed by many things, raised his glass slightly. Congratulations, Seong-jae. And then a voice, low, almost offhand from somewhere to my left, a comment about my past, about Kolade, about what kind of woman ends up in this kind of room. I felt Seong-jae's hand rise to the front of his jacket. He didn't open it, he didn't pull anything, he simply rested his hand there and looked in the direction the voice had come from. The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then a throat clearing, a murmured apology, the sound of someone excusing himself from a conversation he wished he'd never started. Seong-jae's hand dropped. He looked at me. You okay? I thought about it honestly. The room, the people, the weight of being seen in this new way. The old fear I'd expected, and the new thing underneath it that felt, against all of my better judgment, like solid ground. Yes, I said. He nodded, and there was something in that small, private nod, something that wasn't quite a smile and wasn't quite pride and wasn't quite relief, but was somehow all three, that made me understand something I hadn't let myself understand before. He hadn't chosen to protect me because of a debt or a contract or whatever strategic calculation I'd tried to map on his actions in those first terrifying days. He chose it because he stood at a bar with a glass of whiskey he didn't touch and watched a room full of people choose to look away, and he decided quietly and completely that he would not be that room. I had spent 3 months learning to make myself smaller, learning to take up less space, make less noise, be less visible, less present, less there. Standing beside him in that room, I took up every inch of the space I occupied. I didn't look over my shoulder. I looked forward. And this time, finally, terribly, completely, I wasn't afraid. The story of Adanna and Ryu Seong-jae does not end here. Part 2 drops next week. Drop your location and the time you're reading this in the comments and tell me what was the moment you knew the room had changed.